Holy Mary, Mother of God,
pray for us.
Saint Michael,
Pray for us.
holy angels of God,
Pray for us.
Saint John the Baptist,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Peter and Saint Paul.
See, hear, taste, touch, smell. See, hear, taste, touch, smell. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Anthony of Padua, one of the anchors of the Franciscan spiritual tradition, a great and holy saint. This is what the Office of Reading says today, quoting from one of his sermons, St. Anthony of Padua. Our humble and sincere request to the Spirit for ourselves should be that we may bring the day of Pentecost to fulfillment, insofar as he infuses us with his grace by using our bodily senses in a perfect manner and by keeping the commandments. Insofar as he infuses us with his grace by using our bodily senses in a perfect manner. Our bodily senses: see, hear, taste, touch, smell. Today, as we anticipate the beautiful ordination of Abraham, we'll take a look at Francis and the 5 senses of a priest. Now, by Francis, I'm referring, of course, to the great St. Francis of Assisi, but also Pope Francis, both of whom had this spirituality and have the spirituality that is very immersive, that one might say is very sensory. In theological terms, we would recall this as part of the incarnational principle, that God becoming incarnate, that Jesus coming among us, who had all the senses, that he immersed the world, not just with the love from above, but from within emanating outward. This notion that all of creation can be infused with meaning and purpose according to God's plan finds its expression also in the sacraments themselves, that the sacraments are an extension of the incarnation, that if Jesus came among us and experienced all the senses, he knows us well enough that we too, as those sensory creatures, need to make use of all of the senses as we experience the sacraments, the minister of which you will be in a new and powerful way. It's a complete abandonment. The readings today really talk about this, being allowed for God to use you completely. In Kings, Elisha says, "Please let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, and I will follow you." He does so. We're told then he left and followed Elijah, his attendant. This complete letting go so that God can use you. See. Pope Francis talks about the need to go to the peripheries. The peripheries. In the pre-conclave before he was elected Pope, so when he was Cardinal Bergoglio, he introduced this theme at one of the addresses, and then he continued it, of course, into his pontificate. He says there's a tension between the center and the periphery. We must get out of ourselves and go towards the periphery. Now, what does the periphery mean? Think about the term having peripheral vision. Having peripheral vision means that you look to that which might not be in the center of your sight, and you have an awareness, you have a good sense of not just what's right in front of you, but of the periphery. So, a horse, they'll put blinders on a horse so that the horse will not be distracted by the other things, kind of just be looking where you want that horse to look. But to have peripheral vision means that you use your sight to see not just what's before you, but what's on the margins. And so to be a priest who utilizes the gift of sight is to look to the peripheries, and that's where the church is being called under Pope Francis's leadership, as we well know. He says, we must avoid the spiritual disease of a church that can become self-absorbed. When this happens, the church becomes sick. And so it's that outward focus that you, my brother, my son, will bring in your ministry as a priest, to see what others might just ignore on the side of the road, to have that vision that is not narrow but is wide, to see those on the peripheries. Here. Pope Francis this past September gave an address in which he reminded us the priesthood is a gift, not a job. It's a gift, not a job. And he says, it's true that priests have things they must do. And the first task is proclaiming the gospel. But it is necessary to take care of the core, the source from which this mission springs, the gift we have received freely from the Lord. So to hear means, first of all, to listen to Jesus, to hear the voice of Jesus, to not be so involved in the task of being a priest, because tasks are mere externalities, but that core of listening, of using our hearing to say, Jesus, fill me, renew me, give me your wisdom, your insight. Let me hear your voice. Jesus is the source of all. So St. Peter in the reading today tells us, whoever preaches, let it be with the words of God. Whoever serves, let it be with the strength that God supplies, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus. So it's not just ourselves working. It's we who listen as priests and hear the voice of Jesus. There's another sense in which we hear. Quite literally, we hear the needs and the perspectives of the people who we encounter. That we listen to their needs, we hear what they have to say, and then we bring that voice of Jesus to meet their needs. And so we have to hear what those needs are to know what we're responding to. And sometimes, as it's been said, we're answering questions people aren't asking. And we need to know the questions that they're asking. We need to hear from their experience, which will shape us and form us as priests. So we hear Jesus, and we hear those who are around us. Taste. Your province in particular has a great tradition of St. Anthony's bread, which provides not just the blessing of bread, but which supports so many ministries and is a great treasure. And so, of course, as we bring the food that's necessary to our faithful, not just the passing transitory food, but that ultimate taste. You think about Jesus himself on this eve, this vigil of the Feast of Corpus Christi, that the gift of the Eucharist, that Jesus humbles himself in the form of bread and wine, truly his body and blood, so that we can receive him. Through these elements, we can taste Jesus. I mean, it sounds a little so fantastical to even use those words, but it's true. That we can receive our Lord. And certainly, during these days in which COVID has come in, many people have had an imposed Eucharistic fast. You know, they didn't choose a Eucharistic fast, but suddenly it was imposed upon them due to the circumstances in so many ways. And so rather than kind of lessening our hunger, that should propel us to a greater appreciation for the gift of the Eucharist, and we as priests never to lose track of how central that is to the life and the ministry that we bring, that is distinctively entrusted, of course, to priests to bring forth Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And that tremendous gift, you will be a part of meeting not just the physical needs, but filling that spiritual hunger that people have. And we have a hungry world, a hurting world that needs to be satisfied, that needs the nourishment of Jesus. Touch. Jesus had physical contact with other people, stayed close. You know, socially distant, we can't, you know, like spit in people's faces like he did one time, you know, to kind of create a miracle, and he, you know, smeared mud on eyes, and he reached out, and but that's the incarnation in its purest form. God with skin on. God with skin on. How incredible is that? And, you know, this is where we look to St. Francis, whose spiritual intuition, whose genius, was that he knew people needed stuff to see and touch. And so we have Stations of the Cross, so that if you can't go to the Holy Land, which would be fantastic, and you can experience it, and you can walk and see the dirt and the dust and the churches and the Via Dolorosa, and you could be right there. Well, everybody couldn't be there. So rather than just say, well, I'll read about it in books, he brought it to the people through the Stations of the Cross, through the nativity sets, which have that sense that, you know, just we want to touch Jesus. And part of the gift of a priest is to ensure that all those ways that people can just encounter God are made available to them. And people hunger for this. I mean, you know, if you go to St. Peter's Basilica, you know, Peter's statue doesn't even have like a toe or a foot anymore. You know, everybody walks by, they just they want to touch it. One of the fascinating things, I wasn't there, but I've heard about this, you know, when in cathedral, in Los Angeles, they opened their new cathedral, and they had a crucifix in the front, a bronze crucifix, you know, and you work to get the patina right, and what's it going to look like, and how's the coloration. Well, like, what spontaneously happened soon thereafter, I'm told, is that the people just formed a line, and they wanted to, you know, just begin venerating the cross. And so you go there now, and you see that. It's like people, you know, they want to touch Jesus. And that's part of the sensory experience, part of the incarnational principle. Smell. Smell. Catholic life sometimes, our liturgical life, people talk about smells and bells. You know, incense, church bells, bells at the Gloria after we've not sung it for a period of time during Lent, bells in some settings during the consecration itself. This sense of using all of our senses to say, yeah, this is a holy place. And so a priest brings that. But how else might we understand this sense of smell? Pope Francis at the Chrism Mass, in a line that he has used in a number of settings, gives this word to priests, this word to you, Abraham. When a priest doesn't put his own skin and own heart on the line, he never hears a warm, heartfelt word of thanks from those he's helped. This is precisely the reason why some priests grow dissatisfied, lose heart, and become, in a sense, collectors of antiquities or novelties, instead of being shepherds living with the smell of the sheep. Shepherds living with the smell of the sheep. This is what I am asking you. Be shepherds with the smell of the sheep. That means that we're so close to our people, just as a shepherd is close to his sheep, that you're smelling the sheep because he's so close to them. That spiritually, the sense of smell means that we are so close to our people that we put our own skin and heart on the line, that we're meeting their needs and reaching out to them. And Pope Francis rightly acknowledges, if you don't do that, if you're not really engaged with your flock, then even kind of the joys of ministry, of the thankfulness and the gratitude, it all becomes very obscure and a little bit remote. And so then that can lead to a cycle of dissatisfaction. But when you're close with the people, when you're seeing them, when you're listening to them, when, as it were, you're feeding them, you're with them, touching their hearts, you begin to smell like them. And then that beautiful ministry of service, the fulfillment of the priesthood, is revealed. In the Gospel of John today, again, a sobering, very true image. We're told that unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. This image that as we priests here, as all of us, die to ourselves, the Lord transforms us into nourishment for his people. He fulfills his plan. A priest today is an icon of Jesus. Pray that we live up to that beautiful and lofty ideal in the midst of a hurting world. And our world needs you, Abraham. Needs you to hear, taste, touch, see, smell with Jesus, to bring him to a world that's hurting. Francis and the 5 senses of a priest. I'll close with some words. I've been meditating on these a fair amount lately, not from the Franciscan, but as from the Carmelite tradition. St. Teresa of Avila, who in the 1600s offered these words, and may they inspire you as you use the 5 senses of a priest to minister to the people of God. St. Teresa of Avila writes, Christ has no body now on earth but yours, no hands but yours, no feet but yours. Yours are the eyes through which the compassion of Christ must look out on the world. Yours are the feet with which he is to go about doing good. Yours are the hands with which he is to bless his people.